right, so back again with Jared Richards, Full Throttle Law, Ask a Lawyer, miniature podcast series we're doing.
Yep.
Everybody seems to like it. We're getting good feedback on it. Pulling the topics out of the page that seem to be the most questionable, the ones that we can't answer, and you see all the Facebook attorneys chiming in and just looking for clarification.
Hey, what do you got for me?
So about a week and a half ago, there was a chase. You know, a guy went all through town, tore up a bunch of stuff.
Right.
And, you know, the big question that we're pulling out of that is not the whole, it's too much to cover, right? There's too many things in that case. But if you're in your car and you get hit and that person takes off and does a hit and run on you and you pursue that person to try to get a plate number, to try to follow them, you know, trying to protect yourself and try to get, you know,
right.
So you could say, this is the person that hit me. And they get in another accident and hurt themselves. Can they say, well, I was running from that guy because I was afraid of him?
Okay. But they hurt themselves.
Well, the accident, they got hurt in that second accident.
Yeah. But they're the person who hit and ran and was being chased hurt themselves.
Yeah, let's say they crashed into a pole, not even another accident.
Yeah.
So they get into a single vehicle accident trying to flee the first accident.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, it depends.
Okay.
And especially when we get to things like car wrecks, it all goes back down to reasonableness. And the attorneys on either side and the parties on either side, they're going to try to spin the story to emphasize the reasonableness of their side and the unreasonableness of the other side. So let's talk about just in general. First accident. We don't know who's at fault in your story. Yeah. I don't know that we care that much. If you get into a wreck, you are obligated to stop, exchange information, and And if you've hurt somebody, you are required to render reasonable aid if you can. Like if you're the one at fault, you have to render reasonable aid. Now, a lot of people are not insured or they're drunk, and so they leave. Or they have warrants, they don't want the police involved, or they're just scared.
Yeah.
And so they leave. And that leaves the person who got hit in a lurch, because really that guy or that guy's insurance, the guy who's leaving, ought to be paying for it. And so it's very common where I have a client that says they're victim of a hit and run, but don't worry, they followed and they have the plate number. If you can get the plate number, just stop.
Yeah.
We have the plate number, we're good. The problem is we don't want confrontation. We don't want escalation. We don't want self-help, because bad things can happen.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about what happens then. So the person who leaves and flees the scene has committed a felony. Now, whether they will ever be prosecuted for that felony is going to depend on, one, do the police dislike them? Like if it's somebody the police just don't like, there is a chance that they're going to be prosecuted for felony. Outside of that, in my experience, they'll only be prosecuted for a felony if they've caused substantial bodily harm. If it's not substantial bodily harm, and when I say substantial bodily harm, I'm not talking about, somebody's disc has ruptured that they discover it a month later and they're going to have surgery in a year. That's not sexy enough for the DA generally. They want a broken bone. They want immediate hospitalization.
Carnage on the scene.
Yeah, most of the time. Now, case by case, but in my experience, that's what they're going to do. So, the guy who flees the scene, committing a felony, and maybe a felony that will actually be prosecuted. The person who's chasing, you can do that. But the problem is you are then restricted by two things. Everybody who's operating a vehicle is restricted by the rules of the road, which are written down generally in NRS 484B. And those are where it says, don't speed, don't make safe left-hand turns, don't make an unsafe U-turn, those types of things. Yeah. Those are our rules of the road. Everybody has the obligation to follow those. And in addition, on top of that, everybody has the obligation to act reasonably and act as a reasonably prudent driver would act. So if you are chasing, the question is, are you doing those things? Now, if you are not doing those things and somebody gets hurt, there's going to be some real questions about who is responsible for that. Now let's talk about the different classes of victims we can have. In your story, where the person who hit and ran gets into his own wreck, the ultimate question is there comparative negligence? Yeah, there probably is. You could probably argue that because he was being chased. Is there, under the rule of comparative negligence, though, the victim cannot be more than 51% at fault. And the chances are every jury out there is going to hold that person more than 51% at fault. And so realistically, there's that person, he could sue, and he could probably get to a jury, but he's almost certainly going to lose. Now, I guarantee you that person is going to come up with a story about how they fled because they feared for their life, right? And that could be legitimate. If they hit and run and all of a sudden the person who got hit is coming out with, comes out with a gun or a baseball bat. You're going to flee. And it would be, although technically a felony to flee, it was going to be probably reasonable to flee. And I don't think that the police aren't going to prosecute, and the DA is certainly not going to prosecute somebody who is fleeing for their life because they're fleeing for their life. Right? We'd rather have people leave the scene than
preserve life than stick around and get shot.
Exactly. Or escalate. I mean, let's say that you're a CCW holder and you see somebody come out with a gun, but you have the ability to leave. I mean, you could stop, say, hey, what's going on? And try to de-escalate the situation. But the problem is, it could escalate. And if you can leave, then I'm not actually giving legal advice because that's going to be very, very case specific. But there is a world out there where it was reasonable for them to leave. And I could see a jury being very sympathetic to the person who leaves because they think they're about to get killed. And then they get in a crash because the crazy man with the baseball bat and the gun is chasing them. Totally could see that. But most of the time, that's not the case. And so most of the time, I think that if what's happening is somebody is just hit and run, they're not afraid for their life, but they're just drunk or they're not registered, and they get into a crash, I just don't see a jury holding that person, the person who's chasing, being more liable. But again, there's always going to be that question. And we're always going to look and see what was reasonable under the circumstances.
What are the facts?
And you can see like this chase where, you've left and, you fled the scene, but now you have some guy who, again, is driving down the road at 100 miles an hour with like a gun outside of the... You're going to continue to run. And if you get into a wreck at that point, there's going to be a real question about who's more at fault. Now, if you hit somebody who is an innocent, now that's actually raises another interesting question. So let's say the guy who's being chased because he's hit and run, when he crashes, he hits an innocent party. And that party gets hurt. Well, that party is going to look at all the facts and circumstances, and they're probably going to make a claim against both the person who hit him and the person who was chasing. And that's going to be a question of levels of responsibility. So let's say the person is stopped at a stoplight when he gets hit by this fleeing vehicle. Well, all that person has to do is show that based on these circumstances, the person who hit him has some fault, that anywhere above 0%, and the person who is chasing has some fault. All he has to do is prove anywhere above 0%. And so if you're going to chase, just realize that if an innocent party gets hurt, all that innocent party has to do is prove that you are responsible, that you've breached a duty, that you've acted unreasonably, and all they have to do is prove it's somewhere above 0%.
Interesting,
And you are going to be what we call joint and severally liable, meaning the two of you are completely responsible for all of their injuries, and the guy who got hurt, who's the innocent victim, can collect all of his damages from either or both. And so if you're the guy that's sitting with the good insurance, guess who the innocent party is going to be very interested in, even if you're not very at fault. So those are things to think about.
Interesting.
I mean, really, when somebody leaves, I'm trying to think of what I would do. I might follow them. I'm not going to engage in a high-speed chase.
Just try to get the play, like you said, back. You never know who you're dealing with.
Follow the law.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is you don't know who you're dealing with.
Yeah,
you don't know why they're running.
Yeah.
They might be dangerous.
Yep.
But now let's do another spin.
Okay.
What if the person chasing what if they're police? If it's law enforcement and somebody is fleeing from law enforcement? Well, at that point, the innocent victim, they probably still have it'll be an analysis, but the question is, were the police acting reasonably? Were they reasonable in the beginning of the chase? Were they reasonable in the execution of the chase? There does come a level where police in their chase are using deadly force, and they've got to be really justified in doing that.
Okay.
Then that also runs into that interesting question about what about the person who was running from the police and they get hurt because they're running from the police. The vast majority of the time, there's not going to be a claim there, but you could see it, right? I mean, again, it goes back down to, was it reasonable? Were they justified in the chasing? And did they use excessive force in the chasing? And well, most of the time, again, I think the police probably come out okay there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could imagine, you can envision there are circumstances where they may not be, and there may be some liability there. So, but going back to you are the victim of a hit and run, be reasonable.
Yeah.
Don't violate the law, and don't get yourself into a situation where it's going to escalate and you can get hurt because you don't know who you're chasing.
I think a lot of people are under the impression that if they get in a hit and run, they're exempt from any law in the pursuit. Like there's this weird thing that I like looking at the comment section and seeing how people talk. They think that they could break any law they want in the pursuit of tracking down. They've been deputized like some old bounty hunter or something.
They are totally wrong.
They're totally wrong. So that's the big thing, right? Like you still have to obey the laws,
right?
And you could get prosecuted if you break other laws.
And it's one of those things where you may go and have drinks with buddies who say, dude, I would have done exactly the same thing. And maybe they would have.
Yeah.
Heck, maybe the majority of people would have.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that if you are breaking the law in chasing somebody, and let's say you get pulled over, you're going to get the ticket.
Yeah.
And let's say that you hurt somebody in the process of chasing somebody, you're still going to be held responsible, even if they're the ones that broke the law first.
And like you said, if you have an intimidating demeanor, possession of a weapon, you could flee. Even if you just become like aggressive, someone could get scared and leave.
I've seen a lot of video,
a
lot of dash cam in my career where I see super aggressive people come out and I would leave.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like there's one, we've got a case right now that we are about to get summary judgment. It's a former, it's public record, but so it's a former UNLV football player who he hit. There's some sort of a road altercation. There may have been contact between vehicles, maybe not. He clearly thought there was, but we have it on video that he comes up. And my client's in this Jeep. He doesn't have there's no door on the Jeep. And this former UNLV football player comes out without even talking, just stands up, walks up to the guy, and just starts punching him out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah.
And so, again, you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know how dangerous they are. And sometimes it might make sense to flee, although even if that's technically legal, that's not legal advice. That's like, I just don't want you to get hurt advice. But in general, the duty you have, if there is a wreck, you have to stop, you have to exchange insurance. That is the law.
The law.
And fleeing is a felony.
Yep.
But you know what? Keep your cool.
Yep. Both sides. Keep your cool. Yeah.
Keep your cool. There's nothing that you're going to say right then that's going to fix anything. It just isn't.
Yeah.
And when you lose your cool, it might feel good for a second.
But you're opening the door for so much more liability.
Just wait for the police to come, exchange information, don't flee, and if they leave, be reasonable in your pursuit. Don't break the law. If you can get a picture of the license plate, just leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it comes down to dash cams, right? Back to dash cams.
Have a dash cam.
Get a dash cam.
It helps.
Get a dash cam.
But you are totally not justified in doing anything you want
there's no exception.
There's no,
because you're going to get laughed at.
Listen, outside of presidential pardon.
Yes, outside.
You're just.
Whew, pardon me. No, we appreciate it, Jerry. We always do appreciate your time. But yeah, get a dash cam, cover yourself with that, have that going, and we'll dive into some more topics next week.
Cool.
Thank you.
Can't wait.